Our Lady of All Worlds. June 10th to 11th, 2006. The book fitted the palm of the hand like a loved, kissed breviary, small, dense, bound in soft, mottled gold leather that felt strangely warm and silky to Marcelina's touch, as if it was still alive. Hand-sewn header tapes, a bookmark made from that same brass and gold leather, edged with new, bright gold leaf. This was a volume that had been bound and rebound many times. The hand-painted end papers were original watercolour sketches of a river journey, both banks represented, right at the top, left at the bottom, landmark trees, missions, churches, all marked. Indios, adorned with fantastical feathered headdresses and capes, stood in canoes or on bamboo rafts. Pink river dolphins leaped from the water. In the top of a dead tree, red howler monkeys had been depicted in the oversized but minute detail of a dedicated chronicler. All was annotated with legends Marcelina could not decipher. Mestre Ginga signalled for her to set the little book down. The cover bore only the outline of a frog, embossed in gold leaf. With gloved hands, he moved it reverently to the end of the folding camp table before setting the coffee in front of Marcelina. She too wore gloves, and had been instructed under no circumstances to get the book wet. She sipped her coffee, good smoky from a flamenco mug. The walls of the little kitchen at the back of the Fundação were painted yellow, the handmade cupboards and work surfaces blue and green. A patriotic kitchen. A lizard sprang from stone motionlessness to skim up the wall between the framed photographs of the great mestres and capoeiristas of the 40s and 50s before the joga became legal, let alone fashionable. Men playing in Panama hats down in rodas down by the dock, stripped down to the singlets, pleat-top pants rolled up to the knees. The classic kicks and movement, but with cigarettes in their mouths. That was true malandragem. "So," Mestre Ginga said, "what did you notice about the book?" The car had taken off like a jet from the side of the street, and in the daze and confusion and the shock, but above all the single searing icon of her own face behind the knife, all Marcelina could think to say was, "I didn't know you owned a car." "I don't," said Mestre Ginga, crashing gears. "I stole it." It soon became clear that he didn't drive either, blazing a course of grace and havoc between the taxis on Rua Barata Ribeiro, scraping paint thin to the walls of the Túnel Novo, leaping out in a blare of horns into the lilac twilight of Botafogo. I mean, how hard can driving be if taxi drivers do it? Marcelina saw the glowing blue free-form sculpture that crowned Canal Quattro appear above the build line. It was a reassurance and a sorrowing psalm, a promised land from which she was exiled. She breathed deep, hard, the calming, powering intake of air that gave her much burning strength in the roda or the pitching room. "I need a few things explained to me." Into Laranjeiras now, under the knees of the mountain. "Yes, you do," said Mestre Ginga, leaning back in his seat and steering one-handed. "It's knowing where to start. We'd hoped that you wouldn't get involved, that we could handle the admonitory before you learned anything, but when the Benser was murdered, we couldn't hold off." "That was you at the Terreiro." "You always were too clever to be really smart," Mestre Ginga said. Familiar streets around Marcelina, they were heading up to the Fundação. "And you still have a Yoda complex." "I've been keeping an eye on you ever since that clown Raimundo Suarez sent you to Feijão. If he'd kept his mouth shut. But after the split with the Benser, he felt aggrieved. It should have been him got cut up. Then we wouldn't have been in this mess." Wait, what is this mess, anyway?" Onto the corkscrew road, scraping the ochre and yellow painted walls of the compounds. "You want to be down a gear?" Marcelina said, troubled by the knocking, labouring engine. "You're taking it too low." "And since when have you been Rubens Barrichello?" I watch my taxi drivers. So, that woman with the knife, who was she? Who did it look like she was? Me? Then that's who she was. There's a way to explaining this that makes sense. Otherwise, trust me, in this game nothing is coincidence. Then the stolen Ford drew up before the graffitied walls of the Fundação with its brightly coloured, tumbling, happy caporistas, and Mestre Ginga, with a haste and tension Marcelina had never seen in him before, unlocked the gates and showed her round the back into the patriotic kitchen. The book's some kind of expedition journal by an 18th century French explorer on the Amazon. I didn't read very much of it. I find that old stuff kind of hard to read. I didn't ask what it was. I asked you, what did you notice? Well, it's been rebound several times, and the contents are handwritten, but they're not original, I suspect. The illustrations inside the cover had coded writing on them, and knowing the way Brazil was in the 18th century, I reckon it's a good guess that it was originally written in code as well. Good guess. Anything else? Like I said, I didn't read much of it. Now, I'm sure this old 18th century book has something to do with my evil double trying to kill me, but it might be a whole lot simpler if you just got to the point. Anything else? Marcelina shrugged, then a realization of strange, a sense of cold wonder shivered through her. In the blossom-perfumed heat of Mestre Ginga's kitchen, she saw the goose-flesh lift the fine blonde hairs on her forearm. There was a plague of horses. She knew the look on Mestre Ginga's face. So many times she had seen it in the Roda as he squatted in the ring, leaning on his stick. Go on, my daughter. Go on. All the horses, the donkeys, even the oxen, they were wiped out by the plague. That never happened. It's fiction. It's a story. No, it's true. It's a history. It's just not our history. This is insane. Lick the book, Mestre Ginga ordered. Pick it up and just touch the tip of your tongue to it. Sense of cold wonder became vertiginous fear. Favours and privileges had flowed around the organ queen of the Beija Flor, one of them free and unlimited access to the private pool and beach of the Ilha Grande Hotel at Arpoador, the rocky point between the golden curves of Copacabana and Ipanema. Dalliances and liaisons blew through the airy corridors and cloisters, but the children who splashed round the rocks were as oblivious to this as they were to satellites. The big thrill was the leaping point, a 5-metre rock that overhung a Yemanja blue plunge pool. A hold of the nose, a quick cross, and down like a harpoon into the clear, cold water. Marcelina, age 8, had always envied the bigger girls who filled their swimsuits, and the gawky boys who could make the leap. For hot holiday weeks she had tried to call up the courage to go up onto the leaping point, and then, at the last day of summer before school resumed, she had worked up sufficient force of soul to climb up the rock. Her mother and sisters, racked out on the wooden sun-loungers, waved and cheered. "Go on, go on, go on!" She crossed herself. She looked down. The deep blue water looked back up into her soul. And she couldn't do it. There was swallowing madness down there. The climb back down the rock-cut steps, backward, feeling her way, one hand, 1 foot at a time, was the longest walk of her life. Marcelina looked into the book. The golden eye of the frog held her. Where would the walk back down from this painted sanctuary take her? Not back to any life she could recognize. The old caporistas, the great mestres and corda vermelhas taunted her with their jeito. Our Lady of Production Values, who is Our Lady of Jeito, aid me. Marcelina lifted the book to her face and touched the eye of the golden frog with the tip of her tongue. And the book opened, the room opened, the city opened, the world opened. Marcelina lifted a hand. 1,000 hands bled off that, like the feedback echo of visual dub. The table was a church of all tables, the green and blue cabinets a Picasso of unfolding cubes, and Mestre Ginga was a host of ghosts, an Indian god of moving limbs and heads. The book in her hand unfolded into pages upon pages within pages, endless origami. Voices, a choir of voices, a million cities roaring and singing and jabbering at once. Marcelina reached for the table, which hands, and rose to her feet through a blur of images. Then Mestre Ginga was at her side, prizing open her mouth, pouring strong, hot, startling black coffee down her throat. Marcelina coughed, retched up black bile cafezinho, and was herself again, lone, isolate, entire. She dropped into the aluminium kitchen chair. "What did you do to me?" Mestre Ginga ducked his head apologetically. "I showed you the order of the universe." Marcelina slung the book across the table. Mestre Ginga caught it, squared it neat to the end of the galvanized tin top. "You drugged me!" she accused him with a finger. "Yes, no, you know my methods. Your body teaches." Mestre Ginga sat back in his chair and laughed. "And you accuse me?" "There's a difference. That was a spiked book." The book is bound in the skin of the Curupayra, the sacred golden frog. Marcelina had been to the Amazon to research 20 secret ways to kill someone, and had seen the murderous power of brightly coloured forest frogs. "You could have killed me!" "Why should I do that?" "Marcelina, I know what you think of me. You don't have anywhere near as much Malicia as you think. But believe me when I say, what you do have, you are going to need. Every last drop of it. So stop thinking stupid and start acting like a Malandru, because stupid is going to get not just you killed, but everyone else around you." The room shivered around Marcelina, spraying off multiple realities like a dog shaking water from its coat. "So it's some kind of hallucinogen, like ayahuasca?" "No, nothing like ayahuasca." The Ayaus of the Bensa believe that the daime stimulates those parts of the brain that generate the sensations of spirituality. Curupayra shows the literal truth. The eye of the frog is so sensitive that it can perceive a single photon of light, a single quantum event. The frog sees the fundamental quantum nature of reality. The snap was on Marcelina's lips. "And what does a capoeira mestre know about quantum theory?" In surliness was security. She was in a place as familiar and comfortable as home, yet the step from the yard where she played the great game into the green, blue and yellow kitchen was the step from one world to another. Rio had always been a city of shifting realities, hill and sea, the apartment buildings that grew out of the sheer rock of the Mojos, the jarring abutments of million-real houses with favela newlywed blocks, piled one on top of another. And where the realities overlap, violence spills through. Heitor, whose private life you entered through books, had so many times tried to explain quantum theory to Marcelina, usually when she just wanted him to tell her how hot her ass looked in the latest little mesh number. All she understood of it was that her career depended on it, and that there were 3 interpretations, as she tried to get him to take a line from the glass-top table, only one of which could be true. But whichever one was, it meant that reality was completely different from what common sense told us. So shut up the mouth and listen to Mestre Yoda. "Whatever's in the frog skin allows our minds to perceive on the quantum level." "What did you see?" "Like everything had a halo, had other selves." She hesitated over the 2 words that would turn her world upside down, shattering it into glittering dust. "Many worlds." "There are 3 main interpretations of quantum theory," Heitor had said. It had been 3 days after Carnival, when all the marvellous city still had huge stashes of recreational drugs to use up before the feathers and the sequins and the skin glitter were put away, and the world of work reaffirmed its dull authority. Marcelina had been reeling around the apartment, blessed on Iguazu white, practicing her booty shake before it was put away until the New Year Yemanja festival. The Copenhagen interpretation is considered a purely probabilistic interpretation, in that, in physical terms, it gives undue prominence to observation, information and mind. The Bohm carrier-wave theory is essentially non-local, in that every particle in the universe is connected across space and time to every other, which has been seized on by various New Age charlatans as supporting mysticism. The Everett many-worlds theorem reconciles the paradoxes in quantum theory by positing a huge, maybe infinite number of parallel universes that contain every possible quantum state. "Why are you telling me this? Why is this important? What does it mean? Come and have some coke," Marcelina had jabbered. She had never forgotten Aitor's answer. "What it means is, any way you cut it, it's a mad world." Again the room, the Fundação, Jesus on his mountain, spasmed around Marcelina. "I am seeing across multiple universes, parallel Rios, other Marcelinas. What of the ones I can't see, the ones who were that hair too slow on Rua Rabata Ribeiro and were cut open under that knife?" She took a sip of her strong, now cold coffee. "I think you're going to have to explain this to me." Mestre Ginga sat back in his chair. "Very well then, you won't believe it, but every word is true. There is not one world, there are many worlds. There is not one you, there are many yous. There is no universe, there is the multiverse, and all possible quantum states are contained within it. Write down 99.9 and as many nines after that until you get bored with it. That many universes are empty, sterile, exercises in abstract geometry and topology, two-dimensional, gravityless, impossible. Out of that chain of zeros, 0.1, that remain, the greater part are universes where the constants of physics vary by a tiny degree, a decimal here or there, but even that minuscule variation means that the universe immediately collapses after the Big Bang into a black hole, or expands infinitely in a fraction of a second so that every particle ends up so far from its neighbour that it is effectively in a universe of its own, where stars do not form or burn out in a 70. And in the same fraction of those universes, as they are to the multiverse, the fine-tuning of constants allows the ultimate unlikelihood of life to exist intelligently, to found empires and build beautiful Rios, to learn martial arts and make television programs, and quest into the nature of the universe in which it finds itself so improbably. We have penetrated to 10 to the 300,000 universes, and still we are not a thumbnail's thickness into the rind of the multiverse, let alone begun to exhaust the universes where we exist in some form recognizable to ourselves. Everyone's got a theory. Ask any Rio taxi driver, and he'll give you his free. Taxi drivers know how to make a better country, and a perfect Seleção, as well as all the best places to eat. What matters is, how useful is your theory? Does it explain the everyday as well as the weird and spooky? Physics is no different. We've had Newton, and we've had Einstein, and we've had Bohr and Heisenberg, and each time the theory gets a little better at explaining what's real. But we're still a long, long way from a final theory of everything. The ultimate taxi driver theory that you plug a value in, and it gives you everything from the reason there is something rather than nothing to the football results. Physics is now a joda. All the malandros standing around clapping and singing while two theories go in and try to out-jeito each other. There are two big strong boys think they have the malandragem to be the theory of everything. One of them is string theory, or M theory as it's also called. Facing it in the ring is loop quantum gravity. They're calling names at each other, taking each other's measure, trying to trick the other into a simple mistake they can use to make him look stupid, like you made Jair look stupid with that boca de calça. The LQG boys, they're shouting at the string theorists that it's not even wrong. The stringeros, they shout back that it's just dreadlocks in space. Which is right? I'm just a guy who runs a capoeira school who needs some theory to explain what a little book with a frog on the cover has shown him, and that's a hell of a lot of parallel universes. Me, I go for dreadlocks in space. Loop quantum gravity's main theory is that everything is made from space and time woven into itself. Everything can be made from loops of space and time pulled through themselves. Yeah, it's not dreadlocks, it's knitting. But I was reading on online forums. I read the physics forums, why shouldn't I? And there's a guy in the Terrero at Rio U who says that maybe what we think of as space is just connections between pieces of information. Everything is connected information in time, and we have a word for that. It's computer. The universe is one huge quantum computer. All matter, all energy, everything we are, all programs running on this computer. Now, stick with me here. What I know about quantum computers, they can exist in two contradictory states at the same time. And this allows them to do things no other computer could. But I know, because I've seen them, that reality is a multiverse. So those computations are being done in many universes at once. So in fact, all the multiverse is one vast quantum computer. Everything is information. Everything is thought. Our minds are part of it. Our minds run across many universes, maybe all of them. That's what the Kurapaira does, reduces our perceptions to the level where we become aware that we are part of the multiverse quantum computer. And listen well, if it's all information, if it's all thought and computation, then that information can be rewritten and edited. You can write yourself into any part of the multiverse, any place, any time. And another you has written herself into this universe and will run you down and kill you. Think of her as a kind of policeman, a militar. She is part of an organization that polices the multiverse, that seeks to keep the true nature of reality secret, controlled only by a small elite group. She will take your place, and then she hoped to use that to infiltrate us and eliminate us all. I told you wouldn't believe it, but it's the truest thing there is. Marcelina rocked back in her chair. Could you get me... I really need something to drink. Mestre Ginga went to the refrigerator. Full dark had fallen. The blue light from the cool cabinet was painful as he hunted for a skull. Marcelina started at the sound of car tires squealing on the greasy road. Every twitch, every fidget and rustle was an enemy. Marcelina drank the beer. It was stupidly cold and gloriously real, and it slid through her like rain through a ghost, touching nothing. The Mestre's cellular rang, a slow ladinha for solo voice and berimbau. As he talked, low, short phrases, realization passed through Marcelina in the shadow of the beer. I'm a fucking cop out there, somewhere. Mestre Ginga clammed shut his phone. Dew ran down the sides of the can. In a sense, yes. The term we use is an admonitory. It's an old religious expression. There is an organization, call it an order. It's old. It's a lot older than you think. It all goes back to that book I gave you. The order's purpose is to suppress knowledge about the multiverse, that it is possible to cross it, that it exists at all. I can understand why. All our beliefs about who and what we are challenged. The great religions, just comfortable stories. Humankind cannot stand too much reality. The order suffered a partial defeat when quantum theory itself developed the many worlds interpretation, but they still have a firm grip on their central mission, to control communication and travel across the multiverse. And deep down, that is the ability to rewrite the programs of the universal quantum computer. They are the reality cops. Locally, the order is hereditary. It runs in certain old families who have access to the highest level of government, business, and the military. When Lula got elected, the first thing they did was shake his hand and say, "Congratulations, Mr. President." The second thing they did was take him into a back room and introduce him to our Brazilian Sesmaria. The Sesmarias move slowly. The last thing they want is to attract attention. They have to live here. They're not allowed to cross between worlds. But sometimes the opportunity arrives to strike a blow, and that's when they call in an admonitory. Me, when I started looking for Barbosa, that was their opportunity. You were doing all their work for them. First, they discredit you, then they replace you. And when they're finished, they walk away into the multiverse again. It's nothing to do with me, is it? I'm just convenient, a way for the Order to get to you. In the multiverse, you are everything you can be. Villain, mother, assassin, saint. Maybe even hero. A crunch of tires. A horn blew twice. Mestre Ginga looked up. He left the small kitchen with its lingering tang of dende. Doors opening, doors closing, voices on the edge of audibility. Marcelina felt Mestre Ginga's bright kitchen expand around her until it became a universe, her trapped in it, alone, isolate. Aitor used to say that when God is dead, all we have left is conspiracy. This cold illusion, this book of ghosts, would have satisfied his hard, gloomy worldview. The whirling noise and colour and life of the city, a dance of dolls knitted from time and words. Mestre Ginga's cellular lay on the table. Cellular, beer, a coffee mug for a futebol team, a book from another universe. A Brazilian Last Supper. She could pick up that phone. She could call Aitor. He alone remained. Career, friends, family had been stripped away from her like a skin peel, deeper and deeper, rawer and rawer. She should call Aitor, warn him, pick up the phone, press out the number. But she had said that the next voice he heard would not be hers. He would not believe her. But she might have gotten to him already. Her, the other Marcelina. She knows you. She knows everything about you because she is you. Your thoughts are her thoughts, your strengths her strengths. You are your own worst enemy. Your weaknesses, her weaknesses. The creak of the wrought iron gate, footsteps on the floor tiles. The kitchen door opened. An old man, hair gone grizzle grey, but his skin still bright and black, and his bearing upright and glowing with energy, entered. He wore a light linen suit, pants taper-cuffed, high-waisted, and an open-necked silk shirt. Mestre Ginga followed. It was evident in every motion and muscle that he held the visitor in the greatest reverence. Marcelina felt compelled to rise. The old man shook her hand and settled himself heavily on a kitchen chair. "Good evening to you, Senora Hoffman. I am very pleased to see you well. I am the man who made all Brazil cry." February the 12th, 2033. 2 by cab. 2 on the Metro Linea 4 on separate trains. 2 in the van, the biggest risk. 2 already out and running in the rig. Edson by motor taxi. Last of all, Fia. In 1 hour, she will take a minibus cab to the rendezvous at the Dead Mal. No different from a show, Edson thinks. It's all choreography. Each player is equipped with a one-shot cloned identity and has been rigorously de-ARFIDed. Hamilcar and Mr. Smiles' Bill had taken the Jaguar's share of the A World Somewhere prize money. Even so, Edson, clinging to the moto boy as he accelerates between 2 lines of traffic, imagines the talons of the angels of perpetual surveillance reaching for his kidneys. Ephraim checked the restaurant 36 hours before go day. Long tables, clean tiled floors, good food, and no one put their thumbs on the scales. Now in his Edson persona, he picks the big table by the window. The car pound runs from front to back on the block opposite. They'll make their entrance from the rear. Emerson and Big Steak first. Shake hands, a little high-carb, low-protein dinner. Then Eddie Milson and Jack Chocolate. That's the garage team on site. First real risk here. Their gear is in a false registration van parked out on the street. No one should get curious, but Edson taps his long, tapered fingers together in anxiety. "Here, eat something." Edson passes a roll of reis to the mechanics. He's not eating himself. He took a little corajoso when he paid the moto boy, and it kicks in with an accompanying swooping nausea. His stomach lurches as he watches the mechanics load up on meat from the churrascaria. "Keep it down, Edson." Waiginu and Furasao in the rig will arrive on target at the designated time. Where are turkey feet and treats? He flicks the time up in the corner of his eyeshades. Fia will already have set off from the fazenda. Mr. Peach will drop her by the rodoviaria in Itaparasa. There is something headed into town every 2 minutes. He picked the old mall because it is enclosed and free from the eyes of cameras, but it's big and out of the way and full of weirds, and he doesn't love the idea of hanging around among them too long. Where are turkey feet and treats? Then Edson's Corajoso flickers and is snuffed out. 6 cops have just come in, sat down at a table, big guns at their thighs, and are studying the menu. 2 goodbyes. Hey, my mama! The custom in Cidade de Luz is that every sunset the women come out of their houses to walk. Singly or in pairs, by 3 or 4s, feet encased in sports shoes worn only for this social occasion, elbows pumping to maintain aerobic capacity. They pace a time-hallowed route, the winding main road, the old high road that runs parallel to the rodovia, the long, slow ascent of Rua Paulo Menendez, where by some economic gravitation, only car part factors and veterinarian supply stores have taken root. Men too walk the walk. They set out half an hour after the women, and always walk widdershins, to meet the women face to face. They are invariably younger men, or fresh divorcees. In the fast German car, Edson caught up with Donna Hortense and her walking friends outside the Happy Cats Veterinarian Supply Company, and cruised in to the curb beside her. Donna Hortense peered under the brim of the white pimp's hat. "Edson, that you? Kind of you to come over and see me rather than sending that uneducated treats round to my door to collect your laundry. Come on, Mama, you know the trouble I'm in." "I don't know, that's the thing." The girlfriends are looking at him as they might a cop or a debt collector. "Mama, this is not the place." Edson opened the door. Donna Hortense slid into the car, ran her hand over the leather upholstery. "This is nice. Is it yours? Where did you get it?" "A man. Mama, I have to go away." "I thought you might. A long way, a very long way. I don't know how long I'll be away, but it will be a long time." "Oh, Edson, oh my love, but call me, pick up the phone, let me know you're all right." "I can't do that, Mama." The light was fast fading, and in the dark of the car, behind polarized windows by Cidade de Luz's happenstance street lighting, Edson thought his mother might be crying silently. "What? They've no phones? This place you're going to? A letter? Something?" "Mama." "Edson, what is this? You're scaring me." "I'll be all right, and I'll be back, I promise you. I'll find a way back. Don't put me in the book just yet." "Is there anything I can say?" "No, not a thing. Now, kiss me and I'll drop you back at the house, or do you want me to leave you back with the girls?" "Oh, in a big flash car like this? Drop me back at the house," said Donna Hortense. And again, goodbye. "This is probably the most romantic notion I have heard in my entire life," said Mr. Peach. Geography is not always a subject of the vast and slow, of eons and crustal plates. It can spring up in a night. The new green space opened one afternoon, by the next morning is crisscrossed by footpaths, always mystically following the shortest routes to the shops or the bus stop. In the days that Fia has been a refugee at Fazenda Alvarenga, the old drying shed where the sun loungers are stored in winter has been Sextinho and Mr. Peach's place. It's the last place they would think we'd go, back to where she came from. And you, Sextinho, it sounds like a hard world, hers. Grey skies, pollution, wrecked climates. Fia's world was strange and challenging, but in those differences lie opportunities a man of business and wit can exploit to make money. As long as there was still an Ilhabela and an ocean to wash the feet of the house, he would make it there. His dreams had moved sideways. But no angels of perpetual surveillance. No angels. You're going to get one of those computers tattooed on your belly? It was a joke. Mr. Peach knows well Edson's abhorrence of anything violating the sanctity of his skin. But one thing, you will be there. Of course I'll be there. No, I mean, there will be an Edson Jesus Oliveira de Freitas somewhere in that city. It was one of the first things that Edson had thought when he made the decision to flee with fear back to her Sao Paulo. He never could resist a mirror. How would it reflect him? Richer, more successful, a man of big business, married, dead? Worst, just some dust-poor favelado. He could not bear that. It could not be any kind of good luck to meet your ghost self, but how could he fail to intervene in a life like that? Closer than any twin or freaky clone thing, but farther than the farthest star. Him in every atom. He owed it to himself. It won't be the first time I've had to get a new identity, Edson said flippantly, but he was spooked, iced in the vein. Maybe I'll even become Sextinho. Do you know what's so silly and so impossible? I want to go too. All my life I've been teaching the multiverse. I know the theory, I know the math. They prove it more accurately and beautifully than any gross human sense. But I want to see it with my eyes. I want to experience it, and then I'll truly know. If I taught you one thing about physics, Sextinho, it's passion. Physics is love. Why would anyone do this thing, beat their lives against truths we can barely understand, if not for love? Fear says that when you enter superposition, you experience all the other universes at once. So many questions answered. But you little bastard, you won't even appreciate what you're seeing. Go on, hero, do well. Among the mouldering showerheads and aluminium nets and scoops for fishing leaves out of the pool, by the cleaning robot's little hutch, Mr. Peach hugged Edson to him. The kid was so small, so thin and frail-looking, but strong beneath, all sinews and wires, hard to embrace. Just one question, Edson said. When you cross over, do you think it hurts? Treats and Turkey Feet bowl in 18 minutes late, laughing and swaggering and acting cool. Edson is ice with them. They make to laugh at his anger, but then see that none of the others are smiling. Why are you late? We were starving, so we got something to eat and a couple of chops. You've been drinking. Oh, come on, Edson. You're drawing attention to yourselves and to me. We are friends meeting up for a meal after work. Now, whether you've eaten or not, go up and get something from the buffet. No beer. This is an alcohol-free operation. All the while, he watches the policemen go up to the counter for seconds. They're fat, ordinary cops, civils. They're just out, like Edson and his team, for a bite with friends after work. Edmilson and Jack Chocolate, the mechanics, tell trackside tales from Interlagos. Edson hardly hears them. Every second that ticks away on the countdown in the corner of his eye shades is slower than the one before, until they freeze like drips in an icebox. I can't do it. It's all just something I made up. Then he sees himself pushing his plate away from him, standing up, straightening his cuffs, spiking up his hair, and hears his voice say, Are we all done? Then let's go. Tremendous stuff, that Corajoso. The lift hits as he pulls the bandana up over his face. His heart kicks. His breath is shallow and fast and fills him with fire. It's not the Corajoso. It's old hot liquid adrenaline, molten in his skull. It's hitting the best deal. It's that #1 business plan clicking into place. Turkey Feet has the cube laid out. 2 searing passes, and the rear gate is free from its hinges. Emerson and Big Steak lower it lightly to the ground. The guys are already moving as the lasers try to get retina lock. No luck there, militars. Everyone's eye shades are stacked with stolen eye scans. As the alarms kick off woo woo woo, the drone goes in so low over Edson's head he can feel its downdraft muss up his careful gel spikes. It's an old Radio Sampa traffic report drone that Hamilcar and Mr. Smiles got in a Jetinyu deal, and reconditioned to their own grey purposes. It circles like a little spook from a kid's cartoon, pumping out enough variant DNA to bust the budget of any forensics company that tries to profile the crime scene. Lovely boys, clever boys. It might only be graveyard shift at the car pound, but the militars are quick. Nothing on global futebol tonight, then. And tooled for general assault. Firing from cover, Big Steak and Emerson taser the first two out of the trap. Unlike his kid times 6 brother, Emerson enjoyed his army service. Even as the cops hit the ground twitching, Treats and Turkey Feet are on top of them. Turkey Feet has his cue blade at the dazed, dazzled policeman's throat. The guy can't move, can't speak, can only follow the dancing blade with his eyes, blue on blue. Edson smells piss. The tasers do that, he's heard. So does fear. It's a hostage situation now. The remaining 4 Night Watch throw down their weapons and up their hands. They can read the time and geography as well as Edson. 20 seconds, maybe 30 if they'd had a big dinner, for the regional headquarters to assess the threat. Another 30 to establish level of response. Another 20 to alert units. They won't tender out to seguranzas. The military police enjoy a good firefight too much. Surveillance drones will be over the target within 2 minutes of the general alert. Surface units will converge within 5 minutes, but Edson has it timed to the tick, and the garage van is bowling in over the felled gate, pulling up beside the maimed Cook/Chill Meal Solutions trailer. Edimilson has already run the hydraulic jack in and is easing up the left side like he's a superhero. Captain Pit Stop. Jack Chocolate takes a wheel off in 15 seconds with the power wrench. Emerson and Big Steak drag the slashed Hemi tyres away and roll the new ones out of the back of the van. The militars boggle at the skill and speed. "You should see them at Interlagos," says Treats, gun trained on his close knot of hostages. "Fuck up," says Turkey Feet. The first wheel is on. The second. Edson glances at the timer. The truck should be arriving now. And there it is, rounding the intersection with 2 fragrant biodiesel belches from its chromed exhausts. Waiginyu swings it through the gap in the fence, wheels round and backs up close as a kiss to the trailer. Last wheel is on. The Interlagos brothers throw their gear in the back of the van. Emerson and Big Steak jump in behind it. Edson hauls himself up into the truck cab beside Waiginyu and Furasao. The trailer locks, Waiginyu engages, and Cook/Chill Meal Solutions rolls. As they sweep out through the gate, Edson sees Treats and Turkey Feet back toward the open rear of the van. At the last minute, Emerson and Big Steak scramble them in. The militars at once go for their guns, but Edimilson spins the wheels and roars out of the pound onto the street. In the wing mirror, Edson watches the van turn in the opposite direction. They'll burn it and scatter on foot from the drop point. Edson sees the DNA drone skip over the cab roof, climb vertically, and vanish among the rooftop water tanks. He pulls off his bandana, leans back into his seat. The butt of the gun is hard and unexpected against his belly muscles as an erection. He never drew it. He kept that honor. He never showed the gun. Edson pushes his head back into the seat rest, stares at the rosary and the icon of St. Martin dangling from the interior light fitting. Joy beyond utterance cracks through him. He can barely hold himself still from the huge, shaking energy. He did it. He did it. He stole 4 quantum computers from the Sao Paulo Zona Norte military police car pound. He wants Fia. He wants her waiting for him at the pickup point with nothing but him in her manga eyes. He wants her spread and begging on the hood of Waiginyu and Furasao's truck, saying, "You're the man, Edson, Malandro of Malandros. You are Lord of the Crossings. What you did will be talked up and down the laderas for years. That Edson Jesus Oliveira de Freitas, that was wit, that was militia." That Edson Jesus Oliveira de Freitas, Dona Hortense's crazy son, whatever happened to him? That is what they will say. Where did he go? Edson pulls one knee up onto the seat, hugs his knee to him. The in-cab display shows police cars converging on the car pound. They may not have an ARFID lock, but they have a description of the trailer and an idea where it might be headed. Can he hear sirens? Woo-woo all you like, militars. In a moment I will pull my last best trick. On the far side of the city, parked up behind a bakery that does good pão de queijo, Hamilcar and Mr. Smiles glance at an icon on their eyeshades and scatter Cook/Chill Meal Solutions' cloned ARFID ID around 50 vehicles in the truck's immediate vicinity. A smart trick and an expensive one. But there had been enough change from Hamilcar and Mr. Smiles to convert into 6 cut Amazonian emeralds. They nestle in lubricated folded latex in Edson's colon. When he gets to the other side, he's going to require some convertibility. And there she is, sitting on the wall where the light from the soccer ground next door falls brightest. She registers the truck swinging in across the stream of taillights. She jumps up and down in unself-conscious joy. Her little pack bounces on her back. Edson cannot rid himself of the image of her Hello Kitty panties. The truck bowls across the parking lot past the decaying glass and steel hulk of the food court, draws up under the lights, and stops in a gasm of air brakes. "Great choice of location, Edson," Fia says. "Between soccer jocks over there whistling at me and alcos and junkies." Then she runs and kisses him hard, full, right then, right there, where he's dropped to the hardtop, standing on her tiptoes. Maybe it's relief, maybe it's the blaze of success, maybe it's his corajoso leaving him, but Edson feels as if the soccer ground floods have broken into a shower of light raining down on him. Photons, actual and ghost, pounding him, cleaning him, bouncing softly from the stained concrete, entangled as kitten wool with other lives, other histories. The city and its 10,000 towers spin around him. He is the axis of Sampa, of all Brazil, of the whole wide planet and all its manifestations across the multiverse in this instant in the parking lot of a dead Mal. Fia runs her finger along the flank of the trailer, stops at the great circular hole cut out of the side. She leans carefully in to stare up into the trailer interior. Edson knows she is thinking, I died in there. "The back's open," he says. Memory is such a little Judas. So many times Edson has recalled the interior of Cook/Chill Meal Solutions, and now, as Fia finds the light switches and illuminates the decor, the sofa isn't where he remembered, and it's bigger and a different colour, and the coffee machine is on the other side of the counter, and the footstools are zebra skin, not jaguar, and the spiral staircase is more kung fu kitsch than Guangzhou cybercool. Yet Edson feels as if he's on a first date. This is his place, and he's invited her back. She walks around the furnishings, touching, stroking, deeply fascinated by the trails her fingers leave in the dust that has accumulated on the plastic surfaces. "This is weird, weird. I can feel her here much, much more." She glances up at the plastic cube over her head, gives a small gasp of wonder, and climbs the spiral staircase. Edson watches her move around the studio, awakening the quantum cores one by one. The blue glow of quantum dots skeened across universes underlights her cheekbones in sharp relief, Japans her. He had seen a ghost then, a presence in the empty studio, a quantum echo. Edson joins Fia in the glowing blue cube. "The guys want to move the trailer inside. It's not secure out here." Fia waves her hand. Whatever. Her tongue protrudes slightly between her teeth, caught in concentration. Edson steadies himself on a truncheon as Cook/Chill Meal Solutions lurches into motion. Fia moves unconsciously with the flow. "This should be in an art gallery." She sounds love-dazed, incoherent with ecstasy. 4 quantum dot Q cores, and she built them from junk? Where I come from, the Sao Paulo U Q frame, this is decades ahead of anything we have. It's like it's come from the future. Every part of this is beautiful. Can you get it to work? Your language and protocols are different, but I can recode. But can you make it work? Let's see. She slips off her long coat. The tattoo on her exposed belly glows with reflected quantum light. The wheels within wheels on her stomach start to turn. Fia feels Edson's stare. It's just an effect thing, really. She taps keys, leans forward into the blue light. She frowns, her lips move as she reads from the screens. Edson has never seen her so beautiful. It's finding a common communication channel. Ooh! Fia starts, smiles as if to some intimate delight. We're in! She rattles keys. Her skin crawls with gears in motion. Yeah, come on, you puta! She slaps the desk. As if it has heard and obeyed, the truck lurches to a stop. Fia throws her hands up. What did I do? Voices, echoing from the naked rolled steel girders of the rotting Mal. Voices Edson doesn't recognize. He rattles down the spiral stair, cautiously pokes his head out the Q-blade-cut hole. The glinting, sin-black visor of an HUD visor looks up into his face. Beneath it, a grin. Beneath the grin, the muzzle of an assault gun. Visor, visors. The truck is ringed by armed and armoured seguranzas. The rear doors of the trailer slam open. 20 more seguranzas with assault weaponry. The grinning face waves its gun toward the rear of the truck. Get your ass out here, favelado! June the 11th, 2006. The burned skeletons of construction machines still smoked, the orange paint blackened and bleached down to bare metal. The pichaceros had already been at work with their busy little rollers. Me. A shout out to the world from Roquinha. The slab concrete of the wall resisted fire, resisted even sledgehammers, chipped down to the reinforcing rods, but still adamant. So it had been colonized. Every dozen paces the black tag of the ADA, Amigos dos Amigos, laid claim to the territory within. The red CV stamp of the Comando Vermelho challenged it. Graffitis struggled to overtag each other. Lord Wars. The Great Favela was one of the last surviving medieval city-states. 125,000 people lived draped over this saddle between the two great mojos. The apartment blocks rose 11 floors high, balconies flying with laundry, looking down from their mountainside on the lesser towers of comfortable São Conrado and Gavia. The alleys and laderas were busy as rats with white plastic water pipes, the black power cables festooning the sagging poles dipped so low children in their smart school t-shirts and tracksuit bottoms ducked under them. The police barely glanced at Marcelina Hoffman as she joined the throng moving up toward the street market. White was no less rare within the new favela wall than without. Anyone could go in. The São Contradeiros had to buy their cheap meat and cocaine somewhere. The walls were only there to protect passing drivers from ricochets and stray bullets. No other reason but the gunplay, the stray bullets. Anyone could leave any time during working hours. Surf boys with great muscles strolled, boards under arms, down to the beach at the Baja da Tijuca. Their Havaianas crunched broken glass and empty cartridge cases. The police looked them over more in envy than enmity. The sun was hot, the sky was blue, the surf was up, and there was peace, of its Roquinha kind. 10 reggaes bounced from as many windows and verandas. Rain had fallen again that morning, and pooled water on the plastic store roofs turned into treacherous rivers, pouring over the edges of the weather sheets onto startled, laughing shoppers. Marcelina pressed up against a trestle across which 2 lambs lay in absolute dismemberment as a tour passed, whey-faced gringos in 2 olive-drab open-top Humvees armoured for the Baghdad Green Line. Devil-incised teeth grimaced in the stripped sheep skulls, eyeballs glared. Loira. They were right. They had been around the Green Globe and even across the Tijuca Bridge, but this was the first time she had set Manolo in a favela. Marcelina had grown up at the foot of Great Roquinha, but she was as much a tourist as the Yankees in their armoured tour buses. And she thought, why are we ashamed? We decry those tourists in their roll-bar jeeps bouncing down through the market as if they're on safari. Brasilia rails against the unstoppable wave of favelization. We tear down shacks and put up walls and declare Bairro status like tattooing over the scars from a terrible childhood illness, one the Yankees eradicated decades ago. Don't visit them. Don't look at them. Don't talk about them like idiot siblings taped to the bed in the back room. But they are not stumbling blocks on Brazil's march to the future. They are the future. They are our solution to this fearful, uncertain century. A cellular shop. A man making manioc bread on a little glass-fronted barrow. This was the place. Marcelina leaned against the storefront and watched Roquinha busy past. All our worlds, separate yet intersecting. She felt pretty damn pleased with her philosophizing, worthy of Heitor himself. The moto-taxi passed once, turned, returned. The rider, a lanky morena fechada in Roquinha uniform of Bermudas, basketball vest and Havaianas, drew up beside her. "You're the physico," Marcelina said. "Show me," the boy ordered. Marcelina took out the little frog she had bought from the expensive Centro Chocolatier. Motoboy waited. She unwrapped the gold foil and popped it in her mouth. The sweat-heat chocolate left a little print like the spoor of something hunted in her palm. The boy nodded for Marcelina to slip into the pillion. She locked arms around his waist, and he hooted his way out into the throng of market-goers. Across the cracked blacktop serpentine of Estrada de Gavia, the moto-taxi took to its native element like a monkey, the steep laderas zigzagging up between the rough, grey, graffiti-slashed apartment blocks. Amigos dos amigos. It was half a year since BMCV had been cut down by the police, the ultimate arbiters in the war between the drug kings, but the CV's takeover had hardly reached out from the main arterials. Medieval private armies fighting for feudal lords to rule a Renaissance hill town, with walls even. And cellulares. And a functioning sewerage system and water supply. Dogs skipped and barked. Women toiling uphill with plastic shopping bags moved aside to the shelter of apartment steps. Girls smoked in front rooms, tipping ash through window grills. And everywhere children, children, children. Marcelina shouted over the shriek of the labouring engine. "Are you really a physicist?" "Why shouldn't I be?" the boy said, turning onto an even steeper ladera. The moto jolted up shallow, foot-worn steps. Marcelina's toes scraped the rain-wet concrete. "Nothing, it just seems, well..." Whatever she said would show her Zona Sul girl prejudice. Why should loop quantum gravity physicists not live in Roquinha? They were high now, the tree line visible between the tenements that clung to the almost vertical hillside. Marcelina looked down on the sweep of flat roofs with their blue water tanks and satellite dishes and lines of laundry. But the favela was fecund, uncontrollable. Beyond the build line, new houses went up, cubes of brick and concrete, pallets of blocks and mortars sent up by the hoist load to bare-chested bricklayers. Fisico stopped outside a corner lanchonecci so new Marcelina could smell the fresh paint. Yet the Comando Vermelho had laid claim to its tithe in the shape of a red CV on the ochre brick wall. The owner nodded. A barefoot boy trotted out to mind the bike. "We walk from here." A dark archway led between doorways and windows. Televisions blared behind metal grills. Not one tuned to edgy, noisy Canal Quattro, Marcelina noted. Sudden steps led down into a small court. Apartments, piled unsteadily on top of each other, leaned inquisitively over the open space. Two parrots perched on the web of electricity cables that held the whole assemblage in constructive tension. Down another flight of steps into a lightless passage, past a tiny neon-lit cubby of a bar, the seat built into the wall across the alleyway from the tin counter. A bridge crossed a stream buried beneath the concrete underpinnings of the favela, dashing and foaming down from the green, moist Mojo into a culvert. Up and out into the light at the foot of the narrowest, sheerest ladera yet. Físico held up his hand. Marcelina felt the mass and life of the favela beneath her, but here, high on the upper ranges of Roquinha, they seemed the only two lives. The empty, blank tenement blocks were eerie in their silence. Higher and higher, like Raimundo Suarez's Beckham story. Then Marcelina heard a ringing, slapping sound, a rhythm that made her gooseflesh stir. A football bounced into the top of the ladera from a higher flight, struck the wall and zigzagged down the steep steps. Físico stepped under the bounce and caught the ball. He beckoned Marcelina up. She rounded the turn in the ladera. At the top of the steep steps, dark against the bluest sky, was Moacir Barbosa, the man who made all Brazil cry. Over the 10 years she had worked her way up the Canal Cuatro hierarchy, from production runner to development executive, Marcelina's life had necessarily been woven with an eclectic warp of celebrity. Christina Aguilera, Shakira, Paris Hilton, even Gisele Bündchen, Ronaldo, Ronaldinho, all of CSS, Bob Burnquist, Iruan Ergui-Wu, and more wannabe pop stars and telenovela actors than she could remember. Starsickness she got over the first time she had to run to fix a rider for spoiled celeb, that brand of water at that temperature, and shrimp for the doggy. Many had impressed, but none had ever awed, until Moacir Barbosa had stepped out of legend and sat down at the table in the Fundação Mestre Ginga. Swallow in throat, push back the tears. She had been brought from her childhood bed to look upon the face of Frank Sinatra, but those blue eyes had never moved her the way Barbosa settled heavily, painfully onto the aluminium chair. This was death and resurrection. This man in his pale suit had harrowed hell and returned. It was like the risen Jesus had climbed down from his hill high above this cool, cool house. "Have you read it?" He rested a finger on the book. "Some, not all, a little." She was stammering. She was day 3 on the job, pop-eyed at Mariah Carey. "It'll have to do." Barbosa slipped the little book into his jacket. "I only came for this, really. Well, you've found me, and a world of trouble you've made for everyone, but most of all yourself. I suppose there's nothing for it. Ginga will bring you up tomorrow, and we will sort it out." "I don't know what you mean." "The mess you made. You're going to have to clean it up." Barbosa rose as stiffly as he had sat down, yet, like all former athletes, a fit ghost inhabited him, the lithe and limber orisha of a cat-agile goalkeeper. He threw back a parting question from the door. "Would you have done it?" "What?" "Put me on trial, like Suarez said in the papers." For the first time, Marcelina's power of professional mendacity fails her. "Yes, that was always the idea." Barbosa laughed, a single deep chuckle. "I think you would have found it was I who put Brazil on trial. Tomorrow. Don't eat too much, and no alcohol." "Senor Barbosa?" The old man had lingered in the doorframe. "Is it true for you? About the goalposts?" A smile. "You don't want to believe everything Suarez says, but that doesn't mean that it's all lies." High Roquinha opened itself to Barbosa the goalkeeper. The suspicious streets opened shutters, doors, gratings and grills. Electrically thin teen mothers with children on their hips greeted the old man. Young, haughty males with soldado tattoos at the bases of their spines bid respectful good mornings. Barbosa tipped his hat, smiled, took a pão do queijo from a lanchonete, a cafezinho from a stall. Físico dawdled behind. "I don't want to have to move on from here. It's a good place. People have time. People look out for each other. I'm too old. I've moved on enough. I deserve a little peace at last. I've had 5 good years.
I suppose you can't ask for much more. I should have told Fei Zhuao I was dead.
Marcelina asked, "What do you have to move on for?" Barboza stopped.
What do you think?
He tossed his empty plastic cup into a small brazier tended by two small boys.
You should be at school, learn something useful like my friend here, he said to the boys. Well, at least you understand now.
The Curupira, the Order, I don't—
Shut up! We don't talk about that in front of the Gentiles. And that wasn't what I meant. What it's like to have everything, to be king of the Sugarloaf and have it all taken away from you so that not even your best friends will talk to you.
They didn't take your family away, Marcelina thought. They left you that. It was a ramshackle conspiracy. A disgraced World Cup goalkeeper, a favela physicist, a middle-aged capoeira mestre, and now a wrecked television producer. The flimsiest of girder works over the deepest of abysses, that this world, these streets, the skirt of rooftops spread out beneath like a First Communion frock, the blue sea and the blue sky and the green forest of the hills, even the football physical carried with the clumsiness of a geek boy, were a weave of words and numbers. Solipsism seemed so unnecessary under a blue sky, but it was the world in which Marcelina found herself, and the conspiracy suitably dazed and uncertain, as if both white hats and black hats could not quite believe it. Heroes and villains barely competent for their roles, that was the way a real world would work. An improvised, found-source favela solution. Physico unlocked a small green door in a fresh brick wall and flicked on a bare bulb.
You wait in here.
It's kind of little, Marcelina said.
It won't be long. We have to get things ready, Barboza said.
Marcelina heard a padlock snap on the hasp.
Hey! Hey!
The room was concrete floor, roughly pointed brick, a couple of plastic patio chairs, and a beer fridge filled with bottled water plugged into the side of the light fitting. The door was badly painted planks nailed across a rudimentary Z-frame, but they banished the sounds of the streets as utterly as deafness. Spills of light shone through the boards. Alone with your dreads, Marcelina thought. That's the purpose. Descanso, chilling the head. A place between, the dark in the skull. Half an hour passed. It was a test. She would pass it, but not in the way they wanted. She pulled out her PDA and drew the stylus. Dear Aitor. Scratch it out. Aitor. Too abrupt, like calling a dog. Querida. No. Hey. Teenage. Hi, Aitor. Emailese. Like Adrianu's acronym speak. I said I wouldn't get in contact, so that's how you'll know it really is me. That sounded like Marcelina Hoffman. I'm writing this because it's possible I may not see you again. Ever. Overly melodramatic, going for the first line grab like one of her pitches. The stylus hovered over the highlight toggle. This is supposed to be— What is it supposed to be? A confessional? A love letter? Let it stand. That makes this easy because it's the coward's way out. I'll never have to live up to anything I've written here. Glib, but true. He'd read that and say, that is Marcelina. It's silly, I'm sitting here trying to write this to you, and I can think of all the things I want to say. That's so easy, but for once the hand won't let me believe them. Funny, isn't it? I can pitch any number of ideas I don't really deep down love, but when it comes to writing about something important, something real, I freeze. The treacherous hand hovered again, the stylus ready to delete. What could it not believe? This big, bluff, old-fashioned, glum, romantic, pessimistic, hopeful, catastrophically uncool, square-headed newsreader man. His books, his cookery, his wine, his time, his listening, his big gentle hands, his love of rain, his always availability, states of Brazil and world permitting. His too many suits and shirts, and always respectable underwear. His sexiness that was never anything so modern or obvious as raunch, but something older, cleverer, dirtier and more romantic, burlesque, louche, decadent. She saw her stylus had written, "You make me feel like a woman." Almost she consigned it to nothingness. But he did. "You do." So long she had burned with acid envy at her sisters and their men and their security, and she had not realized that she had her man. She had her security. A modern relationship, not something off the shelf marked 21st Century Bride or Hot Teens. A grown-up thing that had evolved from a meshing of work schedules and body parts, but in the end it was a man, a relationship, a love. Her hand shook. She wrote slowly, "You know, I've gotten myself into something bad. If I told you, I would just scare you, and there still wouldn't be a thing you could do about it. It's all up to me now. I am very, very scared. I can't help it. I find I have to play the hero, and that's not a role I know anything about. Give me Jerry Springer trailer trash and Z-list scandal. And I find there are no scripts for this. I'm making it up as I go along. But I've been doing that all my life. It's the thing I know best. I can pitch it. But I honestly don't know how this is going to end. I don't want to think. Barboza. It would have made the programme of the century, but not in the way anyone thought. A show I would have been proud of." Not much of a love letter. Or maybe it was. A Marcelina love letter where she bitches and moans about herself for 2 pages, and then at the end drops in the line, "Oh, by the way, I love you. I think I've loved you for a long time. Can you do that, love someone without knowing? It would be much better if you could. Clean and quick and none of the mad embarrassing stuff, none of the phone bombing and SMS assaults." And then of course I start to think, is it me? And I'm not sure which is the more difficult answer, because one way I'm stupid and I've hung my heart out, and the other I didn't know and you didn't say. Oh, I have to go. I love you. Wish me well. I'm not a very good hero, I'm afraid. Her thumb waited over the email key. It deserved better. He deserved better. The Lysandras dated by email, dumped by SMS. Some show Militia. A scrape, a painful wedge of light opening into a parallelogram of day. Physical stood in the brightness. Marcelina thumbed save and slid the PDA into her bag. "Okay then," she said. "Let's go." The batteria had been playing for 2 hours now, a steady 2-tone tick of an agogo begun before sunset and sent out over the cellular network, the call to prayer. The barasao of the Igreja of the Holy Curupayra was a large living room on the first floor of the new-build apartment block. Cheap vinyl was rolled up, the furniture piled against a wall. A folding kitchen table was the altar, pushed against the big window with its breathtaking view down across the glowing carpet of Roquinha to the towers of São Conrado. A fair gold cloth dressed the table and was scattered with assentamento. Cubes of cake, cones of yellow farofa, saucers of beer, little oranges stuck with joss sticks. Holy medals, soccer stickers, animal game lottery cards, centavos and cigarettes. The air was sickly and headachy from incense trickling from church-stolen burners and Yankee colonial-scented candles in glass jars. Squat saints and orishas guarded the altar. Most had Indio features and carried Amazonian plants and animals in their hands, snakes and jacarees beneath their feet, like the vehicles and attributes of Hindu gods. The only one unfamiliar to Marcelina was a near life-size wood carving depicting an Indio woman, naked, but her skin painted gold, balancing on 1 foot and entwined like a $sign in an S of snake-headed vine. She juggled planets. Marcelina recognized Saturn by its rings, Jupiter by its satellites on projecting sticks. Our Lady of all worlds. The serpent's head was pressed to the woman's pubis. The statue was old, the wood cracked with age, pocked with the flight holes of woodworm, but the craft and care spoke of an age of faith made manifest. Sweepers worked the floor, 2 street boys with twig besoms. The susurrus of sacred Amasi purification soothed Marcelina. The batteria occupied the left window corner of the room, and the drummers were already far into their improvisation, trading tempos and breaks. On the opposing wall, the kitchen door led to the improvised camarinha. As initiate Zemba, Marcelina was permitted into the fundamentos, which seemed to consist of Barboza sitting at a worktop with a cup of coffee, reading the soccer results off his WAP cellular. A brass cage stood beside the bottle gas cooker. Within, a golden frog, stupid eyes wide, throat throbbing. A grasshopper skewered on a pin and wired to the bars offered temptation. An antique brass kettle on the gas hob spelled its fate. Summoned by drums, the Egbe had been arriving since twilight. Mostly men, some few women, pausing to purify themselves with a splash of holy water from the stoops by the front door. All wore white, though watches and jewellery showed they came from outside Rocinha. Many had painted a single stripe of gold down the centre of their faces, brow to chin. Marcelina was dressed in a high-neck racerback top and capoeira pants, all white. Physico had sourced down in the town. The pants were a little chafing in the crotch, otherwise Physico had read her size right. Full dark now, the great favela a fog of light spilling down from the green mountain tops to the sea. The batteria unleashed its full force. The terreiro shook. Cups rattled on hooks. The refrigerator door was shaken open. Glancing out into the Baraçao, Marcelina saw the space before the altar was as crowded with white-clad dancing bodies as any Lapa 4 a.m. club, and yet more piled in behind. Some wore full bridal dress, gleamingly white and virginal. They pushed up to the very front of the Baraçao and whirled, already ridden by the orixás. She saw Mestre Ginga arrive, hastily bless himself and work his way along the wall to the camarinha. He kissed Barboza on each cheek and set a long, flat object wrapped in banana leaves on the table. "Avô," he said to Marcelina's puzzled look. Secret. Now the Alabé was calling, the Egbe and the batteria responding, and Marcelina felt the music kick open an inner door so that fear and apprehension flowed into excitement and anticipation. The drums caught her, lifted her. Even the glorious abandoned insanity of the Réveillon and its 2 million souls had not thrilled her so, called the deep haché and sent tears down her cheeks, shaken her to the ovaries. Barboza touched her gently on the hand, rose from his seat. Marcelina fell in behind him, Mestre Ginga at the rear. Before quitting the camarinha, he lit the gas under the kettle. A wall of sound greeted Marcelina. She lifted her fists. Mick walking onto the stage on the Copacabana beach before half of Rio. The Egbe went wild. Over the physical hammer of drums, so hard it hurt, came a shout from the golden faces. Zemba! Zemba! The Iyaus in their bridal dresses whirled in bolar, the deep possession of the saint. The Daime at Recreio dos Bandeirantes had been a security-guarded middle-class madness. The terreiro of the Curupayra was the true spirit. Haché burned along the concrete floor, from light-fitting to light-fitting. Marcelina was whirled time out of mind. Space stretched, time shrank. She may have danced, she may have been lost for a time among the white-clad bodies, then she was back at the altar. Barboza raised his white cane. Drums, voices, feet fell silent and still. He spoke in a language Marcelina did not understand, part Indio, part Church Latin, but its meaning was clear to her. The calls, the shouted responses. She was the Zemba, the warrior, the protector of the Egbe. Barboza guided her to the front of the altar. The people murmured greeting. Mestre Ginga brought the copper kettle from the kitchen, dancing a fidgety malandragem little tap step as he worked around the assentamento past the drummers. The Alabé started a rattle on his agogo. The batteria took it up, whisper of skin on skin. Mestre Ginga lifted the kettle before the congregation, who again murmured like the sea. Barboza took the kettle,
Quick as only a corda vermelha could be, Mestra Ginga caught Marcelina, pinned her arms. Excitement burst inside her. Barboza brought the kettle up to her lips. She opened her mouth eagerly. This was the sexiest thing she had ever done. Pai do Santo Barboza poured 3 drops of liquid onto the tip of her tongue. The curapairá was rank, bitter. Marcelina grimaced, tried to spit it out. On the 3rd spit, the multiverse blossomed around her. The Baraçao was a dazing blur, room upon room superimposed within, next, above each other, yet each accessible from every other. The eyes perceived, the comprehension reeled. More people, the population of an entire city and the entire planet crammed into this one room. Blinded by the white, Marcelina lifted her hand to shield her eyes and saw 1,000 hands halo it. Edit. Everything is edit, cutting down those endless tapes of footage to meaning. Peering through the white Baraçaos, she caught glimpses of other rooms, families coming together, televisions, meals on battered sofas, car engines on carpets, and beyond them all, the dark forest. She whirled, throwing off a fireworks spray of alternatives to the window. Roquinha was a universe of stars, galaxies beyond galaxies of lights. Marcelina cried out, her ghosts and echoes called around her. The gravity was irresistible. She might fall forward forever into those clouds of lights. Beyond them, other skylines, other Rios, other entire geographies. She saw unbounded ocean. She saw archipelagos of light. She saw green cordilleras and great pampas. Marcelina turned to Barboza. She saw him alive, she saw him dead, she saw him gone, she saw him glorious, a hero, the greatest goalkeeper Brazil ever knew, a government minister, a UN goodwill ambassador. She saw him hounded and humiliated on primetime television. She saw an old man take off his hat and his jacket and walk into the waves off Ipanema. She saw 20 million fingers poised over the TV remote red button to vote, innocent or guilty. Next, the curapairá touched the auditory centres and opened them up. 1 voice, 10 voices, a choir, a cacophony. The reverential silence of the Baraçao became an ocean of soft breathing, became a hurricane. Marcelina clapped her hands over her ears, cried out. The cry rang out from 1,000,000 universes, each clear and distinct. Beyond the edges of the cry were voices, her own voice. Eyes squeezed shut against the shatter of the multiverse, Marcelina forced her understanding toward the distant voices, tried to pick them out one by one. There was a way to navigate the multiverse, she discovered. What you sensed depended on what you focused upon. Focus on the terreiro, on the favela lights, and you saw geographically. Concentrate on a person, on Barboza, on her own voice, and you steered from life to life, ignoring distance and time. Mind was the key. Top to bottom, beginning to end, it was all thought. Marcelina gingerly opened her eyes. She stood at the centre of a cloud of selves, a mirror maze of Marcelina Hoffmans before, behind, to right, to left, above, below, but all connected to her and to each other. One mind, one life in all its fullness. She saw herself a star, commissioning editor, channel controller, telenovela director, pop producer. She saw herself a journalist, a fashion designer, a party gatinha. She saw herself married, pregnant, children around her. She saw herself divorced, alcoholic. She saw herself down. She saw herself dead more times than she wanted. In a fast German car, in a mugging, with a belt around her forearm, in a toilet, at the end of a blade that could cut through anything. There, fast as a bat, moving away from her sight as she touched it, crossing from world to world to world. Herself, her enemy. The anti-Marcelina, the hunter, the cop, the police. I see you, she thought. In that revelation, she saw beyond, to the blur of quantum computations, to the fundamental stuff of reality, the woven fabric of time and calculation.
And she saw, as she remembered sitting backstage with the hands watching the astonishing Ganymede, the famously bad conjurer of the Beija floor, waiting for her mother to sweep up from the band pit on her mirrored Wurlitzer, how the trick was done. It was simple, so very simple. Everything was edit. Take a sample here, another there, put them together, smooth over the joins with a little cutaway. New reality. Innocent and shining with wonder, she reached out her hand to seize reality. Mestre Ginga's arms were around her again, fingers forced open her mouth, a million open mouths, a billion fingers. Coffee. Marcelina choked, gagged, heaved in Mestre Ginga's wire-strung arms. The flocking universes flew away like a storm of butterflies. "Coffee!" she swore, retching dryly over the asentamentos. "You're very much mistaken if you think it's just coffee," Mestre Ginga said, slowly releasing her. "Even those 3 drops can be too much." "I saw everything," Marcelina said. She leaned on the edge of the altar, shaking, head bowed, sweat dripping from her lank hair. "I was... everything." Every muscle spasmed. No capoeira jogo had ever wrung her so dry. Slowly she became aware that there was a room full of expectant devotees in white, waiting for the word from the multiverse. "I saw... her." "And she saw you," Barboza said. "She knows what you are now." "The Zemba." "You are not the Zemba yet," Barboza said. "Tick-tock," said the agogo, beginning a fresh rhythm. The ayaus swayed and swirled, left to right, their dresses floating up around them. Physico entered from the camarinha carrying the leaf-wrapped object. He set it reverently on the altar. Shards of other worlds flickered around Marcelina. Would it always be this? She suspected so. On the edge of her vision, like a floater in the eye that, when looked at, perpetually flees the focus of attention, she was aware of the anti-Marcelina, and that she was aware of her. The Curupaira, the gathering of the Egbe, Barboza revealing himself as Pai do Santo of the Terreiro, were to prepare her for the inevitable showdown. Marcelina stripped away the dry, dust-smelling banana leaves. The leather scabbard was the length of her forearm, worked with an image in ridged stitchwork of the Lady of all Worlds. She took the handle. "Careful," Barboza warned. The blade drew like silk over glass. It seemed to Marcelina that it did not actually touch the inside of the sheath, but was suspended in some kind of invisible film like oil. The blade was long, curved, beautifully dangerous. She held it up before her eyes. The only sound in the baraçao was the clock-tock of the agogo. Marcelina looked closely. The edge was blurred. She could not focus on it. It appeared to fizz and boil, a heat haze on the edge of vision. Marcelina made a sudden cut. The Egbe let out a great coo of wonder. She smelled electricity, saw blue burn across the line of her slash. "I've seen one of these before." "It's the standard issue ritual weapon of the Order," Physico said. "It looks like a knife, but we think it's an information weapon. It cuts down to the quantum level. It undoes the braids of quantum loop gravity. This is technology beyond us, beyond any of the worlds of the multiverse. I think it may always be beyond us. It's part of the fabric of the universal quantum computer itself." Marcelina spun with the knife in a wheeling capoeira armada. Did she hear the shriek of fundamental computations coming apart? "Where did you get this?" "It came with the book. The annexes say that Our Lady of All Worlds brought it up from the bottom of the Rio Negro." Again the multiverse pulsed around Marcelina. Cut. Edit. You are not unarmed now. You are not a victim. She held the knife high overhead. The Egbe roared. The Iyaus whirled. Petticoats held out. The Batteria took up the argument of the agogo as Marcelina strutted around the altar, blade held high. "Zemba!" Mestre Ginga roared, and the Terreiro took it up. "Zemba, Zemba, Zemba!" The weather closed in as the Rocchigna taxi company cab took Marcelina up over the top of the town and down toward the floodlit oval of the Jockey Club. Fingers of low cloud that joined together into a great palm of stratus blew in from the west and pressed down on the Mojos. By the time the taxi reached the lagoon, it was raining steadily. Marcelina itched and fidgeted in the middle of the back seat, burning still with the brief vision of the Curupayra. Every flash of passing headlights, every flicker of pink and yellow street neon cast shadows of other universes. With the Quantum blade tucked into the top of her white capri pants and her clingy top, Marcelina could have conned free entry to any club in Rio. She was death. She was the hunter. She was beyond cool. The driver had been instructed to take her to a safe house Mestrezinha knew in Santa Teresa, but as he cruised the Avenida Borges de Medeiros, the lagoon dark, rain-pocked reflections, Marcelina leaned forward between the front seats and said, "Can you take me on a detour?"
"I don't know. The Mestre said."
"I just want to drop something in. It'll not take 5 minutes." "It's just down on Rua Tabachinguera. It's not even really out of your way."
"I suppose I could, then."
Marcelina took the steep concrete steps that rose almost sheer up the face of the Mojo, a reckless 2 at a time. Love does that. Rain punished her. Good rain, sweet rain. She pressed the PDA close to her chest, protecting it from water. Pools were already forming on Heitor's gloomy garden patio, a lightless concrete rectangle between the rear of the apartment tower and the dripping raw rock. His light and love-starved climbing plants shed rain like sweat. Marcelina knew the key code by heart. Her finger stopped a millimetre above the chrome button. The door was open a crack. Marcelina slipped back from the door and pressed herself against the wall. She called up the live Canal 4 newsfeed on her cellular. "And the police report that Maré and Parada de Lucas are quiet tonight, with armed incidents returning to normal levels." Fagner Death and Destruction Meireles reported live from a Militar cordon. Hissing through her teeth, Marcelina thumbed the volume down. And back to the studio. And there was Heitor standing in front of the giant green screen map of Brazil. "The only newsreader who has to worry about the colour of his socks," he always said. Marcelina sent him into darkness. In one 3G call, elation turned to dread. To more fear than she imagined anyone could know and live. Every part of her ached. It would be very, very good to be sick, even if it was only hot bile, cold coffee, and Torero drugs. She could feel the multiverse flickering around her, a cloud of orishas and angels. Now, this was the time. She drew the blade, crouched into a fighting Ginga stance. Slowly, slowly she pushed the door open. Cat careful, Marcelina advanced through the lobby of books. Stiff, so stiff, and no time to warm up. She would have to go from cold into explosive action. This was no jogo, no game. No lights, but squatting in Cocorinha by the side of the living room door, Marcelina saw a silhouette cross the glittering panorama of the Lagoa. The destruction was to be total. Her career, her family, her friends, her lover. Then, one by one, Physical, Mestrezinha, Barbosa the goalkeeper, the entire Terreiro, any and all who knew the secret shape of the multiverse, and about the order that protected it. And at some point, Marcelina Hoffman. That point was now. Malandros, Mestres, Corda Vermelhas, all you great fighters and dancers, give me Malicia. She stood up, flicked on the main light, and cartwheeled into the room in a one-handed au. Marcelina came up into Ginga, blade ready. She stood momentarily dazed in the light by the kitchen annex, black to Marcelina's white. Of course, this was elemental battle. Her, more than any twin could ever be. Curupayra vision flickered around Marcelina, and for an instant she saw herself through her enemy's eyes, Loira Angel, white caporista. We are each other. One mind shattered across 100 billion universes. Then, the anti-Marcelina came like a jaguar. Marcelina dropped under the blow in a simple resistencia, spun out into a wheeling estobrado kick. Her foot grazed her enemy's head. Then Marcelina rolled into a waist bend, one hand on the floor, the other gripping the quantum blade for all love, and came up into the dancing defensive Ginga. The anti-Marcelina advanced on her in a blinding weave of cuts that struck small lightnings from the air in the apartment. Marcelina ducked, rolled, dived, flipped away from the burning blade. One thing, one edge in Milicia. Her enemy did not play capoeira. She did not know Jetu. A scything blow left the glass coffee table in two capsized halves. Marcelina backflipped over one of the leather sofas into Ginga. "Say something, will ya? Say my fucking name!" Her enemy smiled, and in 3 strokes reduced the sofa to hide and spring and stuffing. Now Marcelina realized that she had underestimated the power of her enemy's weapon. She could run, she could dance, but the anti-Marcelina would cut, keep cutting through anything and everything, keep cutting, keep coming, until she was too exhausted to play capoeira anymore. You have lost the initiative. Time to stop playing defensive. But I'm not a killer. Yes, you are. Look. Marcelina aimed an asphyxianti punch at her enemy's nose, then brought the blade in a scything sweep. The anti-Marcelina dodged the punch and brought her own blade cutting down onto the flat of Marcelina's. There was a flash of light, a cry of reality maimed. Marcelina saw the severed blade of her knife flash up into the air, fall point first into the floor, and vanish. She imagined it dropping through the apartments below, level by level. Even solid concrete and rock could not resist it. She hoped there was no one directly beneath. The anti-Marcelina smiled sweetly, held up her own intact blade. Then she beckoned. Finish it. Marcelina Hoffman ran. Jetu, street smart, the true Malandru knows when and where to fight. A gashed sofa, a bisected coffee table. These Aitor could explain on an insurance claim. A corpse that looked like your lover and disgraced TV producer, that was a career killer. Marcelina knocked off the lights. These silly tricks worked, but that was the essence of malandragem, the pant-pull boca da calça that had felled arrogant Jair. The stupid and obvious was the last scene. And ducked out the elevator lobby door. The slam would betray her, but the few seconds it took for the anti-Marcelina to cut through the lock would give her time and space. Marcelina pelted up the emergency stairs. 2 flights up, she heard the door crash onto concrete. "I'm a dancer, not a runner," she shouted at herself. Footsteps slapping on bare concrete. Up, up, up. But Jesus and Mary, the Curupaira had taken it out of her. The Curupaira and every other torment and mystery and threat and revelation of the past 2 weeks. From Blue Sky Friday to Fight for Your Life Sunday. She fell through the door onto the roof. Room to move, space to fight. Aitor had brought her up here with champagne and coke when she won the commission for UFO Hunt Live. By night, in the rain, it was moltenly beautiful, strips and clouds of soft light, the flow of head and tail lights along the lagoon road, the soft shurr of tyres in the wet, and beyond all, above all, the dark loom of the Mojos. The door crashed open. Her enemy was here. Marcelina rolled into a defensive stance. The anti-Marcelina hefted her blade to a killing grip. Back and forth they fought, strike and counter-strike, across the puddled rooftop, slipping on the loose gravel, tripping on the satellite cables and water pipes. Feint by feint, Marcelina drew her assassin to the sheer face of the Mojo, pressing to within centimetres of the parapet. Above her, concrete pillars rose like organ pipes, stabilising the rock face. There were serviceways up to those piers. She hopped onto the edge and leaped across the gap onto the hill itself. Her enemy followed, but Marcelina was already up onto the service path, a precipitous ledge with only a chain for handrail. A sudden tug almost pulled her from the path. Marcelina reeled back hard against the wet rock. The chain that had almost dragged her down fell away into the dark between the flat roofs of the apartment blocks below. Her enemy looked up into her face. With the last of her strength, Marcelina ran up the steps onto the top of the Mojo. Rio lay beneath her, the lagoon an oval of darkness, a jet jewel set in gold. Leblon, Gavia, the shining spill of Roquinha. Ipanema, a line of light interrupted by dark hills, beyond it the glowing scimitar of the Baja da Tijuca. To her left, the lights of the Copacabana were a golden necklace between the shouldering mojos. The anti-Marcelina appeared over the top of the steps, panting. "Let's have it out," Marcelina said. "Here! No more running or clever stuff. Let's do it here." The anti-Marcelina shook her head. Rain flew from her golden hair. Marcelina was shivering, wet to the bone, but it would end here, far from the eyes of the world, high above Rio de Janeiro. The enemy launched at her. She was good, but she had no jetu, no malandragem. Marcelina dropped into a banda, caught her enemy's legs between her own, and twisted. The anti-Marcelina went sprawling. Marcelina followed with a down-and-dirty kick to the side of the head. The anti-Marcelina howled, but rolled into a knife-fighting crouch. She menaced, jabbing, feinting with the quantum blade. You picked the wrong martial art, Marcelina thought, floating in Ginga, coiled like a jaguarundi. The true capoeirista will always appreciate a good dodge more than a good blow. "You know," she said, "that you don't give a damn about anything that gets in your way, the casual cruelty, I can understand. I've done that myself. But what I can never, ever, ever forgive is that part of me wants to be a fucking cop." The anti-Marcelina struck. The tip of the cue blade grazed the inside of Marcelina's forearm. There was no pain, no shock. Then Marcelina saw blood well from the long, shallow line. The anti-Marcelina reversed her grip, came in again. Marcelina ducked into a defensive cocorrinha and saw it. It was simple, it was beautiful, it was malandragem. She grabbed the cuffs of the anti-Marcelina's pants and pulled up. With a cry, the anti-Marcelina went back over the edge of the mojo. Marcelina watched her own face, eyes wide, drop through the spears of rain. There was no cry, no scream, but the quantum blade cut a line of blue light through the air. She watched her other self strike the edge of a rooftop and bounce, spinning into the greater darkness beneath. Marcelina stood a long time in the hammering rain, counting breaths. Breathing was good. Count them, slow the heart. Count the breaths. 1, 2, 3. Don't think about what you did. Don't think about the look in your eyes as you fell down into the dark between the apartment blocks. You died there. You lost. You won. But in winning, you lost. The multiverse pulled a final malicioso move on you. That's your body down there. Even now she could hear the police sirens, see the flashing lights coming around the dark lagoon. Marcelina Hoffman, the controversial Canal Cuatro producer who recently gained national notoriety when she proposed putting disgraced goalkeeper Moacir Barbosa on trial, was found dead at the foot of Mojo dos Cabritos on Saturday night. Police are continuing their investigations, but suicide has not been ruled out. Adriano Russo, director of programming at Canal Cuatro, said that Senora Hoffman had been under a lot of strain recently, at work and in her domestic life, and had been acting erratically. She imagined Aitor looking into the auto cue. He would be professional. He was always professional. He would mourn later. Her family would bury something. The police would keep the quantum blade and wonder among themselves for decades just how a dead television producer came to be in possession of a knife that could cut through anything. Marcelina looked down into the darkness where her enemy lay. She lost, but she beat you. You are dead too. Footsteps on wet rock. Marcelina spun into defense. A man in loose, dark clothing, formless against the night. A thumbnail of white at his throat. Priest's vestments? "If you want me, you can have me. I'm dead anyway." She stood upright, opened her arms. "You can never win against yourself." A big man, white-skinned, dark hair, hollow-cheeked. Gaunt, she thought, with more than age. His Portuguese was strangely accented, stiffly archaic.
"So who are you, order or player?"
"I was an admonitory," the man said. "Now I am a visitor, a traveller, an explorer, a recruiter, perhaps."
"Explorer of what?"
The man smiled. Marcelina could make out that he had the palest blue eyes. "You know that." The sirens were close now.
"Recruiter?"
What does one recruit for, if not a war? The sirens had shut down. "Come with me," the priest said. "Here, now. This is the one chance you'll get. It will mean leaving everything you've ever hoped for and loved behind. But you've lost those anyway. And there are ways back. There are always ways back. There is a war, but it's bigger than you ever thought. It's bigger than you can think. It's your chance to make a universe. You are a maker. Come and make reality." Marcelina felt the multiverse open around her like wings, each feather a universe. The priest turned away, a billion doors opened before him.
"Who are you?"
Marcelina shouted.
"Does it matter?"
What was there? The girl who came back from the dead would be a hell of a program, but no producer should ever be the star of her own show. The husband, the beautiful children, the babies, the stellar career. They would never happen. One thing she could do.
"I'm not a cop."
"Oh no," the priest said. "Never that."
"That's all right then,"
Marcelina Hoffman said, and stepped after him out among the universes.